which is why it is heartening to see that the White House had to pull back from its plans for the Department of Homeland Security to have a Ministry of Truth. According to CNN yesterday, the disinformation expert hired to run the Department of Homeland Security's newly created Disinformation Board has resigned after the department paused the board. Nina Jankowicz, a disinformation expert with experience working on Ukraine and Russia issues, was tapped to helm the Disinformation Governance Board earlier this month. The interagency team was meant to coordinate department activities related to disinformation aimed at the U.S. population and infrastructure. The problem, of course, is that they hadn't properly defined disinformation, because the left has spent the last several years conflating disinformation, meaning like actual Russian propaganda, from misinformation, meaning stuff I don't like. And in fact, Nina Jankowicz had basically trafficked in both disinformation and misinformation when she suggested that Hunter Biden's laptop was actually just a Russian plant, with no evidence whatsoever. According to CNN, Jankowicz's appointment quickly drew condemnation from GOP lawmakers and right-wing media who pointed to her past tweets and statements regarding Hunter Biden's laptop and Christopher Steele, the author of the so-called Steele dossier. Jankowicz told CNN Wednesday evening she resigned because the board's future was uncertain. Quote, I had hoped we would be more transparent about how the board was going to operate, what it was going to do. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. The information vacuum only grew. I think the information vacuum kind of directed a lot of the attacks and digging around in my personal life. By the way, the digging around in her personal life was mainly relegated to looking at her old tweets and videos of her singing about disinformation like Mary Poppins. I mean, it was very weird theater kid kind of stuff. Ultimately, she said that she had resigned because she wasn't sure whether the board had a future after the debacle of the last few weeks. She said she was deeply disappointed by the administration's announcement it would conduct a review of the board. She thinks it should continue even in her absence. She said the board was simple and anodyne and largely revolved around coordinating efforts within DHS to combat misinformation related to threats to public safety like natural disasters. Okay, but that's not what you actually said. That's not what you actually said. Despite her expertise, critics argued she held biases on certain issues. For example, in a TikTok video posted prior to her appointment to lead the board, Jankowicz singled out Rudy Giuliani and TikTok influencers to a Mary Poppins jingle. They didn't quote her, of course, because if they quoted her, it would demonstrate that she shouldn't have been in charge of this office and that the office never really should have existed in the first place. The White House, for its part, tried to defend Jankowicz and simultaneously explain why it was getting rid of the Ministry of Truth. So Karine Jean-Pierre, again, not good at her job. She says, Jankowicz had very strong credentials. Yeah, man, no.
Neither Nina Jankowicz nor the board have anything to do with the censorship or with removing content from anywhere. Their role is to ensure that national security officials are updated on how misinformation is affecting the threat environment. She has strong credentials and a history of calling out misinformation from both the left and the right, and that's our focus.
Well, then. Karine Jean-Pierre was asked a very awkward question, which is, okay, so you're saying, and you guys have been saying, that the reason you are disbanding this Ministry of Truth is because it's not a Ministry of Truth at all. It's actually a disinformation board, and so you're basically just caving to what you call a bunch of conservative-oriented lies. So you're ditching the disinformation board because of disinformation? Here's Peter Doocy.
So if it's pausing because you think the board was mischaracterized, then the Disinformation Board is being shut down because of disinformation? Is that what's happening here?
Look, I mean, the board was put forth for a purpose, right? To make sure that we really did address what was happening across the country when it came to disinformation.
And it's okay right now, 75 days.
It's just going to pause. There's been a mischaracterizations from outside forces, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to pause it. And we're going to do an assessment.
You're going to pause it and do it. By the way, keep an eye on this because the actual solution the White House, I'm sure, is going to try out here is Jankowicz goes away because she was awkward. And we just sort of quietly bring this thing back and start targeting political opponents. The media, for its part, is doing its best to spin on behalf of the administration and on behalf of the Ministry of Truth. The Washington Post trotted out the world's worst journalist, Taylor Lorenz. She is not a journalist. She is an activist who specializes mainly in digging up old tweets of people she doesn't like and also whining an extraordinary amount about how rough her life is and then crying on MSNBC about how everyone is mean to her by digging up her old tweets and by pointing out that she's really bad at her job. That is sort of her job at the Washington Post. And the editors of the Washington Post like to frame everything. They allow her to frame every story through the prism of how does it affect Taylor Lorenz and why is Taylor Lorenz the most important person on planet Earth. She sort of replaced Jim Acosta in the pantheon of journalists who have actual shrines to themselves surrounded by 7 different mirrors. There's infinities of Taylor Lorenzes in every direction. So the Washington Post runs a piece by Taylor Lorenz today called How the Biden Administration Let Right-Wing Attacks Derail Its Disinformation Efforts. And the article is quite astonishing. So here's what Taylor Lorenz writes today. Quote, on the morning of April 27th, the Department of Homeland Security announced the creation of the first Disinformation Governance Board with the stated goal to coordinate countering misinformation related to Homeland Security. The Biden administration tapped Nina Jankowicz, a well-known figure in the field of fighting disinformation and extremism, as the board's executive director. In naming the 33-year-old Jankowicz to run the newly created board, the administration chose someone with extensive experience in the field of disinformation, which has emerged as an urgent and important issue. The author of the books, How to Be a Woman Online and How to Lose the Information War, her career also featured stints at multiple nonpartisan think tanks and nonprofits, and included work that focused on strengthening democratic institutions. But within hours of the news of her appointment, Jankowicz was thrust into the spotlight by the very forces she dedicated her career to combating. The board itself and DHS received criticism for both its somewhat ominous name and scant details of specific mission. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said it could have done a better job of communicating what it is and what it isn't. But Jankowicz was on the receiving end of the harshest attacks, with her role mischaracterized as she became a primary target on the right-wing internet. She has been subject to an unrelenting barrage of harassment and abuse, while unchecked misrepresentations of her work continue to go viral. By unchecked misrepresentations of her work, do you mean that we played actual clips of her talking on shows like this one? And that people just brought up her old tweets, which is literally what Taylor Lorenz does for a living? Taylor Lorenz, for a woman who's obsessed with herself, apparently she has an unbelievable capacity never to actually see what she is in a mirror. She sees herself, but she doesn't quite see herself, According to Taylor Lorenz, just 3 weeks after its announcement, the Disinformation Governance Board is being paused, according to multiple employees at DHS, capping a back-and-forth week of decisions that changed during the course of reporting this story. On Monday, DHS decided to shut down the board. By Tuesday morning, Jankowicz had drafted a resignation letter. But Tuesday night, Jankowicz was pulled into an urgent call with DHS officials who gave her the choice to stay on, even as the department's work was put on hold because of the backlash it faced, according to multiple people with knowledge of the call. Nina Jankowicz has been subjected to unjustified and vile personal attacks and physical threats, a DHS spokesperson told the Washington Post. In congressional hearings and in media interviews, the secretary has repeatedly defended her as eminently qualified and underscored the importance of the department's disinformation work, and he will continue to do so. So basically what happened here is that it became clear that Jankowicz was going to get thrown under the bus, and then it was clear that the administration was going to get flack for that. So now the administration is wildly backtracking and pretending that they actually had Jankowicz's back after throwing her out there. Jankowicz's experience, says Taylor Lorenz, is a prime example of how the right-wing internet apparatus operates, where far-right influencers attempt to identify a target, present a narrative, and then repeat mischaracterizations across social media and websites with the aim of discrediting and attacking anyone who seeks to challenge them. This is solid reportage, right? This is journalisming at its very finest, the hot, sticky journalism just getting everywhere. It also shows what happens when institutions, when confronted with these attacks, don't respond effectively. So this article goes on and on and on. And the whole idea here is that it's evil right-wingers who dug up stuff that she said. Oh, no. Wow. I mean, people pointed out what she said. That's crazy. Just hours after Jankowicz tweeted about her new job, far-right influencer Jack Posobiec, says Taylor Lorenz, posted tweets accusing the Biden administration of creating a ministry of truth. Posobiec's 1.7 million followers quickly sprung into action. By the end of the day, there were at least 53,000 posts on Twitter mentioning Disinformation Governance Board, many referencing Jankowicz by name. You mean people questioned the establishment of a government agency with no clear agenda that called itself a Disinformation Governance Board? Wow, I mean, that is scandalous that people noticed. It's bad. Unlike the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 that became a derogatory comparison point, neither the board nor Jankowicz had any power or ability to declare what is true or false, or compel internet providers, social media platforms, or public schools to take action against certain types of speech. In fact, the board itself had no power or authority to make any operational decisions. So then what exactly was the point of the board? The board's purpose has been grossly mischaracterized. It will not police speech, the DHS spokesperson said. Quite the opposite. Its focus is to ensure that freedom of speech is protected. Yeah, I don't believe you. And most people, it turns out, didn't believe you. Dozens of websites, including Breitbart, the Post Millennial, and Daily Caller and New York Post, began mining Jankowicz's past social media posts and publishing articles to generate controversy. Some were simply mocking, making fun of her for parodying a song from Mary Poppins to talk about misinformation. In another instance, a performance where Jankowicz sings a popular musical theater song about a person's desire to become rich and powerful was misrepresented to imply that Jankowicz herself was after money and power and would sleep with men to get it. What? As this online campaign played out, DHS and the Biden administration struggled to counter the repeated attacks. And by the way, there are a bunch of sort of libertarian and civil rights-oriented groups, ranging from the ACLU to Reason Magazine had some pretty serious questions about this Disinformation Governance Board and what it was going to do. None of this gets mentioned by Taylor Lorenz. It was all just Jack Posobiec and the Post Millennial and the Daily Caller and the Daily Wire, etc. It was all just about how everyone is mean. A textbook disinformation campaign, says Taylor Lorenz. Experts say that right-wing disinformation and smear campaigns regularly follow the same playbook, and it's crucial that the public and leaders of institutions, especially in the government, the media, and educational bodies, understand more fully how these cycle operates. The campaigns invariably start with identifying a person to characterize as a villain. Attacking faceless institutions is difficult, so a figurehead, almost always a woman or a person of color, race, is found to serve as its face. Whether that person has actual power within the institution is often immaterial. By discrediting those made to represent institutions they seek to bring down, they discredit the institution itself. So I love this. So basically, the entire article is about how the Disinformation Governance Board was not going to be targeting political opposition. And then the entire article is about how really we do need something to stop political opposition from mobilizing. We really need to stop all of these right-wingers from, posting old posts of people. We really need to cut that out. Amazing, solid stuff there from Taylor Lorenz, demonstrative, once again, of the fact that what the left really would like to do is police speech. And they'd like to police speech because when they are losing, this is what they do. The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.